I call it beautiful, clean coal. I told my people never use the word coal unless you put beautiful, clean before it. Right, Doc? So we call it beautiful, clean coal. Beautiful, clean coal.
Tonight, a quiet energy maneuver is turning into a test of presidential control. According to public reporting, President Donald Trump is expected to sign an executive order directing the Pentagon to use contracts and federal funding to purchase electricity from coal-fired power plants for military operations. Reportedly, the Energy Department is also preparing funding for upgrades at multiple coal plants. The order text and contract terms have not been published in full, and Reuters reported it could not independently verify the underlying report at the time. In Washington, that gap is where institutional resistance begins. According to public reporting, Trump's posture is to treat coal power as a strategic asset and make the Pentagon an anchor customer. The reported executive order would push Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth to enter agreements to purchase electricity from coal-fired plants to power military operations. That framing tries to convert a declining industry problem into a national security procurement choice. The miscalculation sits inside the mechanism. Defense procurement is not a free-form lever. It is shaped by contracting rules, justification standards, and oversight expectations that create a durable record. When a president aims that machinery at an industrial outcome, every step becomes contestable, and the presidency stops being the only engine that matters. Trump looks proactive in headlines, but the process forces him into reaction once compliance officers and appropriators start asking for proof. Institutional resistance begins with the information gap. Reuters reported it could not independently verify the Bloomberg report and that the White House and Pentagon did not provide immediate comment. In practice, that silence hands initiative to outsiders. Lawmakers can demand briefings, auditors can flag risks, competitors and utilities can prepare challenges. The move becomes defined by scrutiny before it is defined by published language. The destabilizing consequence is immediate uncertainty for markets and regulators. Procurement signals also move capital, so even a hint of preferential buying can distort bids and invite complaints. If the Pentagon is directed to buy coal power, the next conflict is price, scope, and duration, and those answers live in documents that can be delayed or disputed. The policy clock accelerates as missing details become liabilities. Reportedly, the move is not limited to Pentagon contracts. Reuters reported that, alongside the expected executive order, the Department of Energy planned about $175 million for upgrades at 6 coal-fired power plants across Kentucky, North Carolina, Ohio, Virginia, and West Virginia. The design is familiar. Pair a purchasing mandate with federal capital support, then claim momentum before the system has validated the math. Reuters also reported it could not independently verify the Bloomberg report and did not receive immediate comment from the White House or Pentagon at the time of publication, which leaves the plan exposed to competing interpretations. The blind spot is that electricity is bought inside layered governance. State utility commissions decide what costs can be passed through to customers. Regional grid operators weigh reliability against price. Long-term resource plans balance fuel risk, emissions limits, and maintenance costs. A federal demand signal can collide with all of that at once, especially if the purchases appear above market or structured to keep specific plants alive. Trump is betting that federal dollars can overwrite market signals, but the market answers with invoices, filings, and objections. According to statements reported by the Associated Press, the administration has defended emergency orders that kept aging coal plants operating during severe winter weather, arguing they helped avoid shortages. Critics quoted in the same reporting argued those interventions could raise electricity costs and prolong uneconomical plants, with estimates cited of billions of dollars in extra annual costs. That dispute is a preview of the Pentagon approach. Once costs are quantified, the conversation shifts from symbolism to rate impacts, budget exposure, and who absorbs the premium. Another pressure point is emissions and compliance. Upgrades and extended operation can trigger new permitting fights, community opposition, and litigation over air and water impacts. Even if the administration frames this as security, the disputes will be filed as environmental and consumer protection claims, pulling the plan into courts and hearings that do not move on White House timelines. Institutional resistance then tightens from 3 angles. budget scrutiny over federal spending, procurement compliance inside the Pentagon, and rate case fights at the state level. The destabilizing consequence is that Trump's plan creates multiple veto points, and each veto point reduces his leverage as the cost story hardens into numbers. The climax is not a ceremony. It is the point where contracting language collides with the legal and operational world that must execute it. According to public reporting, the executive order would direct Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth to enter agreements to purchase electricity from coal plants to power military operations. That phrasing sounds narrow, but the implication is broad. The Pentagon would become a stabilizing buyer, not because coal is the cheapest option or the least risky, but because the White House wants coal to stay on the grid. Trump's miscalculation is assuming an executive order can compress time. Contracts do not move at executive speed. They move at institutional speed. They require scope, pricing terms, performance requirements, and either competition or a defensible exception. They also require a justification that survives oversight. If the Pentagon buys power at above market rates or with unusual conditions, the rationale will be probed. If the Pentagon buys through an intermediary, the structure will be probed. If the Pentagon buys directly from specific plants, the selection criteria will be probed. Every plausible pathway produces a record, and every record creates exposure. Reuters reported it could not independently verify the Bloomberg report and did not receive immediate comment from the White House or Pentagon at the time of publication. That gap accelerates institutional resistance because it leaves no official text to settle boundaries. In that vacuum, different actors write their own interpretations, and those interpretations drive action. Utilities treat the signal as a potential mandate. Competing generators treat it as market distortion. Lawmakers treat it as an oversight opening. Budget staff treat it as a spending question. Regulators treat it as a cost risk. Investors treat it as volatility. Trump is not managing those reactions. He is being managed by them. The destabilizing consequences stack in layers. First is the accountability layer. A power purchase agreement tied to military operations will still be documented, funded, and reviewed. Even if the administration frames it as resilience, critics can argue it is industrial policy disguised as security. That claim does not need to win a narrative fight to matter. It only needs to survive long enough to reach auditors, inspectors general, or congressional committees where timelines stretch and outcomes turn on paperwork. Second is the cost layer. The Associated Press reported that the administration has defended emergency orders keeping coal plants running during severe winter weather, while critics argued those interventions can inflate electricity costs and prolong uneconomical plants, citing estimates of billions of dollars in extra annual costs. A Pentagon contract would carry the same vulnerability. If the government pays a premium to keep plants operating, the premium becomes a number. A number becomes a budget argument. A budget argument becomes a constraint. Third is the governance layer. Coal plants sit inside state regulation and regional grid planning. Keeping them running can require maintenance, compliance upgrades, staffing commitments, and fuel arrangements that utilities must justify to regulators. If a federal purchase encourages extended coal operation, utilities may seek to recover costs through rate cases. If regulators resist, utilities can litigate or restructure their plans. Either way, the friction is institutional, and Trump is forced to respond to forums he does not control. Fourth is the legitimacy layer. The more a policy depends on special contracting arrangements, the more it invites challenge from parties excluded from the deal. In energy, those parties include natural gas suppliers, renewable developers, and consumer advocates who can claim the government is distorting markets. The debate then shifts from ideology to documentation, and documentation is not a terrain where slogans carry weight. Finally is the timing layer. Public reporting suggests the plan is being unveiled with political staging and industry presence. That creates a visible commitment. If contracts bog down, the administration is left defending intent without delivery. If contracts proceed and costs rise, the administration is left defending a forced transfer that looks less like security and more like subsidy. In this climax phase, the policy clock speeds up for everyone except Trump. His order, even if signed, is only an opening bid. The real game is played by contracting officers, appropriators, regulators, and courts, and the center of gravity shifts away from the Oval Office. According to public reporting from the Associated Press, the The Tennessee Valley Authority, the nation's largest public utility, has reconsidered plans to close 2 major coal-fired plants, citing rising demand and regulatory changes. That decision is not proof that Trump's Pentagon plan is already working. It is a sign of the environment he is trying to exploit and the environment that can trap him. Trump's posture treats coal as a strategic asset that can be preserved through federal force. The miscalculation is that utilities preserve assets when governance and economics allow it, not when a president needs leverage. In the same Associated Press reporting, clean energy advocates criticized TVA's shift, raising concerns about public input and pollution. That is the institutional pattern. Every extension of coal operation generates an organized opposition, and organized opposition generates procedural delays and formal challenges. Resistance in this stage is operational and relentless. Utilities must justify fuel choices. Regulators must defend rate impacts. Grid planners must model reliability. Community groups can challenge permits. Even the administration's own defense of emergency coal orders, also reported by the Associated Press, shows how quickly reliability claims turn into disputes over evidence and cost. Trump is forced into reactive posture because every supporting argument creates a counter-record. There is also a credibility squeeze. If the administration argues coal must be kept online for resilience, opponents can demand the same standard across fuels and technologies, and they can point to winter performance data, grid operator reports, and cost filings to dispute the narrative. Each dispute pulls the story into technical forums where presidential messaging carries less weight. At the same time, a Pentagon-centered buying program can raise questions about favoritism between regions, site selection, and who benefits from federal demand. Those questions can surface in state hearings, congressional letters, and inspector general reviews, each creating delay and reputational risk. The destabilizing consequence is policy whiplash. Investors and operators see a federal push toward coal alongside market and regulatory pressures pulling away from it. That divergence raises uncertainty and the price of capital, which is the opposite of control. As utilities, regulators, and advocates protect themselves, Trump's remaining room narrows into paperwork-heavy moves that invite challenge at every step, and the next filings arrive faster than the next announcement. At this stage, Trump's options are narrower than the posture implies. According to public reporting, the administration is trying to lock coal into the power system through Pentagon purchasing agreements and Energy Department support. But the missing contract details and the reliance on procurement pathways mean the plan is already constrained by oversight, pricing, and documentation. One option is disclosure. The White House can publish the executive order, text, and contracting rationale in full, then argue the purchases are narrowly tied to military operations. That may steady the narrative, but it also gives opponents precise language to challenge authority and scope. A second option is retreat by redesign. The administration can narrow the program to short-duration agreements or limited sites, reducing exposure to cost and litigation. That lowers risk while also shrinking impact, turning the strategy into visible damage control. A third option is delay, which hands momentum to regulators, auditors, and market forces that do not answer to the president. The wager was speed, but the system is setting the tempo now. For continued coverage of how institutions box in presidential power, follow this channel.